Okay, so stop after Q&A.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Sam Pausha, and alongside me I have my partners Danny Nick, Atisha Punya, and Pushkar Chawal. And today we are here to discuss why you as Ferrero should backward integrate and purchase Olden Group. And we're going to discuss how this is going to streamline your value chain. So we're going to start off by, I'm going to give a little agenda here. So we'll start by giving some background information on Olden Group. Then we're going to discuss why we encourage backwards integration and then some integration strategies for that. And finally, we'll wrap it up with a conclusion.
So currently, Ferrero is facing a rise in hazelnut prices, and this is largely due to harsh weather conditions, which has led to a low seasonal yield. Additionally, speculative trading has also contributed to artificially high prices. The Olden Group is Ferrero's #1 supplier. In fact, 70% of Olden Group's sales can be directly tied to Ferrero. And additionally, the Olden Group has 20 to 30% of the world's market share in hazelnuts, which they source directly from Turkish farmers and traders. So the issue really comes down to how does Ferrero control its costs without, in an industry where commodity prices are fluctuating rapidly. Our recommendation is a backwards integration strategy, and this will help us recognize the benefits of acquiring the Olden Group. Our backwards integration strategy has 3 parts. The first is sourcing solely from farmers. Second is having a proper inventory management. And third, simplifying the manufacturing process.
Yeah, so we believe sourcing solely from the farmers is going to create the most value for Olden in the process. As you can see in our diagrams, the top diagram is how it originally is. So it goes from the farmers to the traders to Olden to Ferrero. We believe that the process is inefficient and just creates an extra step in the process. We want to eliminate the traders completely, which will ultimately reduce the costs. The traders only bump up the price and increase price variability, and so by eliminating the traders, we eliminate that completely. By doing this, we're going to create some financial benefits. We're going to have more consistent pricing. Olden Group is going to know exactly who's producing the product and how, and be sure that they're using proper farming techniques. So we're going to skip the middleman of the trader. This is also going to reduce a couple of costs. It's going to lower the transportation costs, and as well as reduce the lead time from getting the hazelnuts to the Olden Group. By reducing the transportation time, we're just skipping that middleman, so the product is touching less hands, and it's going straight from the farmers right to the Olden Group, and just eliminate that middleman completely. Then we're going to have some operational benefits as well. We're going to compete in fair trade sourcing, which will help sustainable farming practices. Ferrero participates in a process called FFV, which is Ferrero Farming Values. This is an engagement process that helps have sustain agricultural practices. So they'll be able to increase the value of their processes. By eliminating the traders as well, we're also going to eliminate the knowledge and communication gap between the Olden Group and the farmers. So the Olden Group doesn't have to go from the traders to the farmers. They're just going to go straight to the farmers and go right to the source. So they're going to have that better relationship with the farmers. So they're going to know exactly how their product is being produced, where it's being produced, and making sure that they're using proper processes. By doing this, by participating in fair trade, we are also going to increase our help boost our PR. In a recent study done by Harvard Business Review, the 2 most popular coffees had a 10% increase in sales once they started participating in fair trade. We expect similar outcomes as well once we start participating in fair trade as well.
So I'm now going to discuss the inventory management and how backwards integrating is going to simplify this process. So there's going to be a couple of key points here. The first is going to be economies of scale. So because you're owning the process, you can determine how much hazelnut goes into each product that you're making. So if you have high demand for one specific product, you can really crank out a bunch of those products really quickly and have lots of flexibility with that. You'll also also have more accurate forecasts. So because you're eliminating those two middlemen, you're working directly with the farmers, so you can have a more accurate representation of what the supply forecast is going to be. So as Danny mentioned, you're gonna eliminate that communication gap, so you'll know when a season is harsh on the product itself, so you'll be able to have a more accurate representation of how much product you'll actually have, or how much materials you actually have. And additionally, you're working directly with the consumer, so you will know, as you always have, how much demand is forecasted as well. Now going off this, because of the reduced lead time and the transportation cost, there'll be a reduced bulb effect. Because of that lack of communication gap, or reducing the communication gap, you'll be able to be very flexible and adjust rapidly to fluctuations in unexpected demand or supply of the product. Moving on, there'll also be reduced downstream market competition. Now with that, you're going to purchase Alton Group and own a majority of the market share, so competition is going to be reduced. You'll also have diversified risks, so instead of buying from one company or one company and a few traders, which was Alton Group, you'll be buying from multiple farmers. Because you're purchasing from multiple farmers, if one farmer has a bad season, you'll be able to contact another farmer and let them know that you need increased demand from them. This is going to go along with controlling the price of the product, which this graph on the next slide here is going to go over. So as production increases for hazelnut, the price decreases. And if we get more if Ferrero Group gets more production, we'll be able to keep that price low. So as you're eliminating these traders who had a high fluctuation in prices and really increase the price a lot, you'll be able to control how much production is being made and how much production and how many materials are going into your production process to really keep that price low.
Now the third part of our recommendation is simplifying the actual nut processing, the manufacturing process. Because you would acquire Alton Group, you would be able to control and own that process and be able to tailor it to your needs. For example, one of the outputs that this process produces right now is the shelled hazelnut. However, Ferrero does not use the shelled hazelnut in any of its products. Therefore, we can take that output out entirely and focus the time, machine hours, and labor, and reallocate that to the outputs that are needed for Ferrero's products. And subsequently, we can take out the step that leads to that output as well. If you go to the next slide here, we can see that this is the current process that we use, that Alton Group uses, and that second step right there is something that we can eliminate because it doesn't add value to Ferrero's needs. Here's a simplified process. We take out that second step, which was sizing the hazelnuts, and we take out that output, which is the shelled hazelnuts. Here we see the two steps that we plan to remove from that process, and the goal is to really reduce throughput time, and again, reallocate machine hours to the outputs that are actually beneficial for the chocolate.
So moving into the costs and risks for this acquisition, a few years back, Hershey actually had a similar acquisition where it acquired the Malalawa macadamia nut company, and we use this as our benchmark, as you can see up here, to derive our purchasing price for the Alton Group, which would be $4.5 billion. Additionally, we use the Malalawa operating expense to drive our operating expense of $461 million. And from here, we got our operating income of $39 million.
Now, with a large undertaking like backwards integration, we understand that there are many challenges that this entails, and our team took a holistic view at all the risks that are entailed in this acquisition. One of the risks we see is related to antitrust laws. Because we would be increasing market share when it comes to downstream market share, we could be perceived as having a monopoly on the inputs that go into chocolate. However, taking a look at Turkish antitrust violations in the past, we can see that the overwhelming majority of those are related to cartels and price mixing. However, our strategy is along vertical integration, and there have been no antitrust violations in the past that have dealt with that sort of thing, which makes us think that this would be an okay step to take in Turkey. You wouldn't have regulatory issues. Another possible risk that we have is the fact that nut processing is not a core competency for Ferrero right now. There's limiting nut processing experience. However, to combat that, we plan to leverage the ISO 9001, 2008 standards already in place by Alton at one of these factories. By leveraging that and by retaining the frontline workers who are at these factories, we plan to have that transfer of knowledge so that Ferrero Group, when they acquire Alton, has that knowledge. And finally, one of the risks is managing relationships with farmers. Because we're sourcing from farmers directly, managing and maintaining the relationship is going to be a risk that the group hasn't had before. However, we plan to leverage something that's already in place by Ferrero right now, which is the Ferrero Farming Values engagement, which Danny pointed out earlier. The FFV engagement is a corporate social responsibility tool used by Ferrero to encourage best practice farming techniques for the farmers and support them through the manufacturing or through the growing process.
So as we know, there are risks involved with this adjustment, and it is a big adjustment. We know that the value of making this change greatly outweigh the reduced impact of the risks. So to wrap it up, we want to summarize the 3 strategies of backwards integrating. So A, we are going to source directly from farmers, and we'll have a better management inventory system. And finally, our manufacturing process will be simplified. We'd like to thank you all for listening today and coming out this morning, and we'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you. I guess I wouldn't mind if maybe we could just go back to the financials. I know you mentioned the valuation of about $4.5 billion, and maybe just take us through this one more time. I'm not sure
Sure, I can take this one. So we saw that the revenue for the company that Berkshire acquired, Manawa, was about $15 million, and the actual acquisition price was $130 million. So we took that multiplier of 9, and because the companies were valued similarly at that time, we used the multiplier of 9 to take the revenue from Alton Group, which is $500 million, times it by 9, and arrive at that $4.5 billion figure.
Okay. And then, I'm actually more interested, maybe can you help me with the bottom part of the operating cost? I'm looking for a $4.5 billion investment.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a return on investment down the road at what X multiplier? You know, where do we think the efficiencies of the investment or recoveries of that might come in?
So we looked at the operating expenses for Manawa operation, and we were able to derive the one for Alton Group. And we had the revenues already, so we were able to come up with an operating income of $39 million.
We're gonna pay $4.5 billion to make $39 million?
For the first year, yes. That's the yearly operating income. But that's without recognizing any of the synergies that will be in place.
But I think that's what we're trying to get at is if we're gonna spend $4.5 million, and you guys did a really great job of pointing out a lot of areas that you can realize benefits for time, operations, the fair trade increase. Can we get a visual at all of how that, at what point do we get back up $4.5 million investment?
So looking at it, we'll be working directly with the farmers, and this FFV program, hopefully we can encourage more farmers to go so we can get more products down the line and more quality materials in it. So down the road, we'll be able to really have more products and increase output, and since we're owning the process, we can increase output more and more and drive our revenue that way. So it's a high initial investment, but through that, after time, we'll be able to increase the output that we produce because of the raw materials and the process that we created, increasing revenue later.
What about, so with the trader being eliminated, how much cost does that inject in the system now? And that would be supplemental over time, right? So about how much cost do you think that puts into the pipeline today that we'd be able to remove and essentially be able to pick up over time?
Right. So the traders now are from the case we can see that they're manipulating prices. They're pricing proactively for droughts or bad weather conditions, and they're pricing at about 20 lira per the unit that they sold in. And we hope to bring that down to about 14, which is what the baseline was, the average, and have that price consistent over time. So because we're not dealing with the pricing manipulations from the traders, we have a better estimate of what the costs are year after year, and can better forecast and plan for those.
Another recommendation you guys had was in streamlining the manufacturing process. So
Yes.
what is you could say, I get the benefit to Ferrero. What's the impact? Because that's really going to impact the other 30%, right? That Ulton currently supports.
So there would be definitely an opportunity cost of not selling the shelled hazelnuts, which many other companies do buy from Olton. But essentially, we see that as more of like worth it because the decrease in cost and like how many hazelnuts you need, especially considering like if you say that suppose the minimum you can get is 500,000, like at the worst harsh conditions, you can still do your strategy and like get the products you need without having to worry about this product.
I do also want to reiterate that the shelled hazelnuts are not going out the window. They are being cut down and being processed to be used for the other 3 outlets. So just reallocating that and pushing it for the other outlets essentially.
So we're still gonna have that manufacturing process?
Well, it's here in the process is cracking of shells and separation of nut meats. So instead of sizing according to shell size, you take all of the hazelnuts and put it through the cracking and separation process.
So previously, if the hazelnuts were a certain size before, if they were a certain size, like if they were as big as they would like for the product shelled hazelnuts, they would just take them out right away and sell them to other companies. Or for the products that we need as Ferrero Group, any size works for making it into a paste or chopped up, so we can use all the materials that go into the process and utilize them for further output for the 3 types of products there.
Yeah. So there's not really waste in the product. We're using all the products, regardless of the size. And since their biggest product is that hazelnut paste, which goes into the Nutella, it's like obviously the most benefit in using all our resources to head toward that one.
So are we, I'm gonna go back to what Nick said, are we concerned about losing that 30% of the sales? And are we gonna be able to make it up with our own internal supply?
Yeah, so the 30% of the sales that don't go to Ferrero Group right now, we can encourage the FFB Corporation to start, or the FFB project that we have, to start more farmers producing more hazelnut, and so other companies that use those whole hazelnuts can maybe go towards them, and we can establish those relationships later.
We're gonna be walking away from $150 million in sales. Are we gonna be able to make that up?
150 million.
30% of 500 million?
Oh, yeah.
So we're essentially, are we walking away from that?
No, we're not, because as Danny mentioned, we're not throwing it away, we're just throwing it into the process that goes towards our 3 products.
Could you talk a little bit about if we have to cut out the trader? Traders exist for a reason. They're offering a better price than we are to the farmer. Have you given any consideration to the price that we're actually going to have to bring to the farmer in order to cut out the trader?
Well, like we said, we would set a price ceiling of 14, and the trader, we already work with farmers and traders directly. So especially if we're needing less hazelnuts, that gives us definitely more buyer power instead of like their supplier power, because if we're not even needing as much to make the second product where, you know, the product that we're taking out, we don't have as much, like, we don't need as much from them, and therefore we have more control over the price for, like, that we need. And as I said earlier, like, we already work with the farmers, and the traders are, as it said in the case, that they are already increasing the price artificially to plan for these frosts and weather conditions that haven't actually happened yet.
So what's going to prevent the trader from going to the farmer and saying, I'll offer you 14.05?
A lot of that is going to come down to the relationship with the farmers, which is going to be a main emphasis throughout this process, because the communicating with them is really going to be a mutual relationship where both are affected. So we can communicate better with the farmers, and they have a loyalty towards us that will encourage them to keep coming to us at $14 instead of the traders at $14.05.
So if they have are they going to have a loyalty to us as a new company coming in and trying to, you know, establish this relationship. If it was that simple, why wouldn't Olton, who has a local presence, already have done that?
So the loyalty comes in the form of the FFV program, the Furrow Farming Values. That program, the value add to the farmers there is that they have best practices that will be able to provide them in terms of farming. That's something the traders don't provide right now. The traders merely take the product. We would be able to partner better with the farmers though and provide that value that they aren't getting right now.
And the Ferrero Farming Values also focuses on how to increase the revenue for the farmers. So it's not just showing them sustainable farming practices, it's showing this is how you can be the most profitable and get the most margin out of your product.
So you had a chart that you put up, and you're talking about one of your value props around controlling pricing based on more volume.
Yeah.
So within that chart, you had a fair amount of variation relative to your control. Do you
Yeah.
know what drives that variation?
So we assume that the actual demand for hazelnuts is increasing over time as products like Nutella become more and more popular. So there's not a steady variation there because demand's increasing, but there's also seasonality changes that happen over time. So we looked at it as throughout the whole 6 years, how often is the price of, or the production of hazelnut low and then the price high.
So do we know, was it just a matter of seasonality, there's an issue, because I look at that second from the right data point, that suggests a spike in price relative to your control. And is that driven by a seasonal change, is that driven by some constraint in the market? I mean, why did the trend change as we moved out that way for that?
Yeah, as far as we know, the trend just changed because of demand for the product, and there are dates associated with it, just not on this graph. But we don't know that, like the independent variables of that.
Have you given much thought to other options that might be available to better secure the supply? Kind of jumped right into the acquisition. Any other things that we could do?
There is a potential, as opposed to instead of just buying Bolton, any other possibilities. There is a potential to work directly with traders instead of overcoming this high cost. However, we believe that the traders, the relationship we establish with the farmers is really going to get us the highest return on investment.
Plus, we see the traders had that increase the prices with that price variability, and so then if we decrease that and just focus on relationship and then FFV with the farmers, then we'll be able to see the value in that, and I think that would be worth more of an investment than working with the traders and working with that middleman, which just creates that extra step.
Do you think we have the competencies today to effectively work directly with the farmers?
The FFV program has been in place for about a decade now. So the program is already established. That development does not need to take place and is not a cost of this engagement. So yes, I'd say the competency is there currently, and it has been used in the past.
And you think the farming population is open to that, or do you think we're going to run into issues with farmers that want to work with really the relations they either have with traders or just they're not set up themselves to work directly with them?
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably like a learning curve in getting used to working with Alton Group instead of the traders, but I'm sure that just comes with seeing that the provide value and revenue that the farmers will get from the FFV program. So I think that over time that they'll get used to working with straight from Alton Group instead of the traders.
And we did look at other companies who had similar programs. For example, a subsidiary of Cargill, Mosaic, tried something like this with their farmers for farming like crop inputs and stuff like that. And they implemented this program very successfully in African countries. So the competency is there, and this model has worked in the past. And I'm sure we can tailor it appropriately for the hazelnut initiative as well.
Any other questions?
Out of time.
We're at time. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Nice meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
hours to prepare, and, which is very different in the real world, right? You never